Ladies and gentlemen, this is exciting. It's the final installment of the top 5 greatest players for each NBA franchise. Now we're at the end. We're finishing off with the Washington Wizards / Baltimore Bullets. Before I get into that, I have to admit, I've had a lot of fun doing these. These have been fun to do, get to research it. So you get some players that you didn't really know much about. I got to research, like Bob Pettit for the Atlanta Hawks, or some players may have forgotten about a little bit. So that was also a fun factor too. Like Tony Allen for the Memphis Grizzlies is one. So that was kind of cool right here to get to do this. Get to remember some players may have forgotten about, get to mention some underrated players, get to do some research on players wasn't familiar with. That's been the fun part about it. But now, it's it. So let's get right into it. If you haven't seen any of these videos, I got the playlist both in the chat, both in the comments and in the description box, so make sure you can check it out. If this is your first one, for this entire series, I only use a certain player one time. So I only use Shaq once as one of the greatest Lakers. I use LeBron as the greatest Cav. So now, so that played a factor in this list too, where that opened the door for certain players to get acknowledgement, like for the Miami Heat. It opened the door a little bit for a few honorable mentions, such as Udonis Haslem, Mario Chalmers. That was kind of the theme of it. And another theme for some franchises, their list was a lot easier to put together. For others, had to do some research. The Wizards, this was kind of one of the easier ones to put together. But without any further ado, let's get right into it. A few honorable mentions. You had Jeff Malone and Jeff Ruland, decent players throughout the 70s, 80s stretch for the Bullets before they became the Wizards. Not great players, not Hall of Famers, but decent players. And then the last honorable mention is Caron Butler. He was a role player throughout his career, but his best years came with the Wizards, made 2 All-Star teams. Was a good teammate along with Agent Zero and kept the Wizards relevant in the Eastern Conference in the late 2000s. Now, with that being said, on to the top 5. Start with number 5, Bradley Beal. Bradley Beal, in recent years, he was kind of the guy that kept the Wizards somewhat relevant. He at least kept ticket sales booming. Now, the team success under him wasn't that great, but Bradley Beal, during his tenure with the Wizards, was a loyal player, and he was a great scorer. Not necessarily a great all-around player, but he was a good scorer and one of the better players in Wizards / Bullets history. And certainly worthy to be in the top 5. On one hand, that speaks to Bradley Beal's importance to the team, but also, with all due respect to Bradley Beal, it does speak to the fact that the Wizards / Bullets haven't had a lot of great players in their franchise's history. But Bradley Beal is one of the better players and worthy of a mention. Now, the best team years came during the 2010s when he was the number 2 guy behind John Wall. Now, John Wall, during his tenures, was a great two-way leader, and he helped during that rebuild post-Agent Zero, and he made the Wizards relevant in the East. Now, unfortunately, they didn't have a great all-around team. They didn't have the most sound front office to put an excellent team around them, but guess what? They did. John Wall took over, led the way, and did his best to carry that team and keep them relevant. Now, again, they weren't the greatest team, unfortunately, but John Wall made the most of what he had around him. Even with a crappy front office, he kept that team relevant and got them to the playoffs numerous times. So peak John Wall, one of the better guards of the 2010s and one of the top Wizards of all time. Moving on to number 3, speaking of guards, another guard from the 2000s, Agent Zero, Gilbert Arenas. Unfortunately, Gilbert Arenas' off-the-court issues kind of hindered his career and shortened his peak. But when he was a member of the Wizards, he dominated, especially on offense. First couple years with the Warriors, kind of meh. But then he found his fit with the Wizards, and he took over and led that team to the playoffs numerous times. And during his tenure, he kept them relevant in the Eastern Conference and kept them. Usually they were in the playoff mix every year he was there. He's a multi-time All-Star, one of the better guards of his era. before his personal issues brought his tenure with the Wizards crashing down. But Agent Zero certainly comes to mind as one of those main faces in Wizards history. Certainly the face, on the court-wise, the best player of the modern Wizard. It's in the best 21st century Washington Wizard. So that's why I got him at number 3. But the number 2 and 1 go back to the old Bullets days. Their championship win in the late 70s. We start with Wes Unseld. He was a 5-time All-Star, Rookie of the Year. He was a Finals MVP and an MVP all during his long storied career with the Baltimore/Washington Bullets. And he's one of the guys that helped make that franchise relevant in its early years of existence and helped contribute to its only championship win. Now you look at those numbers, you would think possibly the greatest. But he was the second greatest. Just a great, he was a great all-around player, one of the best of his era. Wes Unseld, one of those all-time greats that doesn't always get recognition amongst modern fans as the game is going along, but guy worthy of recognition. Another guy worthy, the greatest Washington Wizard/Washington Bullet/Baltimore Bullet of all time, Elvin Hayes. Elvin Hayes was another guy on that championship team in the late 70s. He was a 2-time rebound leader, a 12-time career All-Star. Now, he did have a few of those All-Stars before he was with the Wizards, but most of them came during his tenure with the Wizards/Bullets. And he was part of the face of that championship team. So for that right there, the most dominant player in Wizards/Bullets history and the lead guy for their championship run. So for that right there, I got Elvin Hayes, the greatest Washington Wizards/Washington Bullets/Baltimore Bullet of all time. You guys want to comment? Give me your top 5 players in franchise history. Also, make sure to drop a like and subscribe. So that's it, folks. We did it. Top 5 greatest players for each NBA team. This was a lot of fun, man. Sometimes it was interesting with some of these. Interesting part was only using players one time. So like for Jason Kidd, I only used him with the Nets. I couldn't use him with the Mavs. So that means I had to do a little more research on Mavs history. But that opened the door for me to give guys like Brad Davis a shout out. Only use Steve Nash as a Phoenix Sun. That opened the door for me to give Jason Terry an acknowledgement on the Mavs list. But that was the fun part about it, because it actually required some research and some thought. Using a certain player once instead of just, we'll use LeBron for the all-time Cavs and the all-time Heat. Only use him as an all-time Cav. So I do some research. And that was great because I got to get different names mentioned throughout this list. But man, this was a lot of fun. I appreciate everyone who watched these vids, whether you watch one of them, multiple, or all of them. Thank you for watching these vids. I appreciate your support on these series. This was a fun project. Now what I'll do is I'll take a little bit of time, reset my mind, think about another project coming up for you guys. That being said, have a great day. Until next time, it's your boy Nicky Steez signing off. Peace, and we got more NBA content coming. Stay tuned.